Welcome to the realm where tales weave the fabric of our lives. From the tender whispers of bedtime stories that cradle our childhood dreams, to the grand epics that echo through the ages. Stories are the heartbeat of our existence. They are the invisible threads that connect us, the whispers of love and courage that ignite our spirits. Here, every story is a journey, a dance of words that promises to touch your soul and awaken the dreamer within. So settle in, dear listener, for a tale that will transport you to worlds unseen, to adventures untold. This is where magic begins. This is where you belong. Crossroads in the City of Stars. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of a dream, where each path unfolds into a myriad of possibilities, each step a dance with destiny? What if one night could unravel the threads of your existence, weaving a tapestry of choices that define the very essence of who you are? In the heart of a city that never sleeps, under the watchful gaze of a million stars, two souls collide in a serendipitous encounter. But is it mere chance or the intricate design of fate that guides them? As the world holds its breath, awaiting the verdict of a nation, can the dreams of two individuals illuminate the darkness of uncertainty? What if the key to unlocking their deepest desires lies not in the clamor of the crowd, but in the whispers of their own hearts? Join us on a journey through the streets of Los Angeles, where every turn is a story, every moment a memory in the making. Will you dare to step into the unknown, to chase the echoes of a dream that beckons from the horizon? Let the prologue of this tale unfold, and may it lead you down the path less traveled, where the end is just the beginning, and the beginning an end in itself. The streets of Los Angeles were alive with anticipation. It was election night, and the city was a canvas of vibrant colors and sounds. Neon signs flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of hues onto the bustling crowds below. Music pulsed from the clubs, each beat a heartbeat of the city's nightlife. Charles stood at the entrance of one such club, his sharp suit a stark contrast to the casual attire of the passersby. He was the master of ceremonies, the charismatic club promoter who knew the ins and outs of La'E's social labyrinth. With a confident smile and a nod, he welcomed the throngs of partygoers, his eyes scanning the crowd for potential VIP guests. "Welcome to the heart of La'E's nightlife. Feel the pulse," he called out, his voice rising above the din. Ava, a visitor from the Midwest, found herself drawn to the epicenter of excitement. Dressed casually but elegantly, she moved through the crowd with a sense of wonder. The city was unlike anything she had experienced back home or alive. More intense and infinitely more intriguing. "It's hard not to. It's like the city's alive," she replied, her eyes meeting Charles' for a fleeting moment. Their exchange was brief, but in that instant, a connection sparked. Charles was used to the transient interactions of the club scene, but something about Ava's genuine curiosity piqued his interest. She wasn't just another face in the crowd, she was someone who seemed to see beyond the facade of the city's glamour. As the night progressed, Charles navigated the club with ease, his presence commanding attention. He was the orchestrator of the evening's festivities, ensuring that every guest felt like the star of their own movie. Meanwhile, Ava explored the venue, her senses alight with the new experiences each room offered. The club was a microcosm of the city itself, diverse, dynamic, and pulsating with life. The election broadcast played in the background, a reminder of the world beyond the club's walls. Yet, within this sanctuary of sound and light, the outside world seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Charles and Ava's paths crossed again. This time inside the club, it was an accidental meeting that felt like fate. They found themselves at the bar, the clamor of the crowd a backdrop to their burgeoning conversation. Do you believe it all matters? The election, Ava asked, her gaze fixed on the screen displaying the latest updates. Only if we let it define us. You? Charles replied, his tone nonchalant yet probing. Their banter continued, each exchange peeling back layers of their personalities. Charles, the ever-confident promoter, revealed glimpses of depth beneath his polished exterior. Ava, the thoughtful visitor, displayed a sharp wit that belied her unassuming appearance. As the night unfolded, Charles and Ava found themselves drawn into a world of their own creation. The club, with its endless possibilities, became the backdrop for a story yet to be written, a story of a boy, a girl, and a dream that began on a night like no other inside the club. The atmosphere was electric. The air was thick with the scent of excitement and the faint aroma of cocktails. Strobe lights danced across the faces of the crowd, each person lost in the rhythm of the music. The election broadcast played on screens around the room, but it was merely a whisper against the roar of conversations and laughter. Charles moved through the club with a practiced ease, his eyes sharp and searching. He was a man who knew everyone and yet, somehow, managed to remain a mystery. His suit, impeccable, his demeanor, unflappable. He was the king of this domain, and he ruled with a benevolent hand. Ava, on the other hand, felt like a fish out of water. The club was a maze of sights and sounds, so different from the quiet streets of her hometown, yet she was drawn to the energy, the undeniable pulse of life that thrummed through the place. She watched, fascinated, as people mingled, their faces alight with joy and abandon. It was then that fate intervened, and Charles and Ava's paths crossed once more, a stray elbow here, a misplaced step there, and they found themselves face to face amidst the throng of particuars. Do you believe it all matters? The election, Ava asked, her voice barely audible over the din. Charles looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, the noise seemed to fade. Only if we let it define us. You? He replied, his voice steady and sure. Their conversation flowed as naturally as the music that filled the room. They spoke of the election, yes, but also of dreams and aspirations, of the world beyond the club's walls. Charles's usual charm was there, but there was something else, a genuine interest in what Ava had to say. Ava found herself opening up to Charles, sharing thoughts she hadn't even voiced to her closest friends. There was something about him, something that made her feel heard, understood. And as they talked, the club seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them. Alone in a sea of people, the night wore on, and their dialogue deepened. They debated, they laughed, they contemplated the what-ifs of life. And as the election results trickled in, a backdrop to their burgeoning friendship, they realized that this chance encounter might just be the start of something new. The club was a world of its own, a place where anything seemed possible. And as Charles and Ava navigated this world together, they discovered that their unlikely paths might just lead to a shared journey neither had expected. In the quieter corner of the club, away from the thumping bass and the blur of gyrating bodies, Charles found a reprieve. The dim lighting cast long shadows, and the distant sound of the crowd was a gentle hum compared to the cacophony of the dance floor. Here, he could hear his own thoughts, and more importantly, he could hear Ava. She had followed him to this secluded spot, her eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You seem different from the rest," she said, her voice a soft melody over the muted beats. Charles chuckled, a sound tinged with a hint of sadness. "Had plans, you know. Big ones. Life had other ideas," he confessed, his gaze drifting to a spot over Ava's shoulder, as if he could see his past ambitions painted on the walls. Ava leaned in, her empathy palpable. Maybe it's not too late for either of us, she offered, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. The connection was electric, a current that ran deeper than mere physical contact. They shared a moment of understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits. Charles has dreams of making it big in the music industry, of leaving his mark on the world, had been dashed by harsh realities and even harsher disappointments. Ava, with her desire to make a difference, to break free from the expectations of her small-town life, found a mirror in Charles's experiences. They talked for hours. Their voices low and intimate, Charles spoke of his youth, of the fire that once burned within him, a fire that had been doused by the pressures of survival in the city. Ava listened, her heart aching for the young man who had dared to dream and had been knocked down for it. But as the night wore on, something shifted between them. The disillusionment that had hung heavy in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a burgeoning sense of hope. They spoke of possibilities, of the paths not yet taken and the dreams not yet pursued. Ever feel trapped by your own life? Ava asked, her question hanging between them like a challenge. Charles met her gaze, his eyes alight with a spark that had been absent before. Every day. But tonight feels different, doesn't it? He replied, the hint of a smile playing on his lips. It was a turning point, a pivot from the past to the future. They were no longer just two strangers in a club. They were allies in the pursuit of something greater. As the night gave way to the early hours of the morning, Charles and Ava found themselves not at the end of a conversation, but at the beginning of a journey. The club's energy had changed, or perhaps they had changed. The election results continued to pour in, a distant reminder of the world outside their bubble. But for Charles and Ava, the real story was just beginning. Charles and Ava stepped out of the club, leaving behind the pulsating music and the charged atmosphere of election night. The cool night air was a welcome relief after the heat of the crowded space. They walked side by side, their steps in sync as they made their way through the neon-lit streets of Los Angeles. The city was alive, its energy palpable, as if it too was waiting for the election results. But for Charles and Ava, the election had become a backdrop to the personal journey they found themselves on. They talked as they walked, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Ever feel trapped by your own life? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet clear in the quiet of the night. Charles nodded, his eyes reflecting the neon signs they passed every day. But tonight feels different, doesn't it? He replied, a sense of wonder in his tone. They continued their walk, the cityscape changing around them as they moved from the bustling downtown area to the more serene setting of the beach. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was a stark contrast to the noise of the club. It was here, with the vast ocean in front of them, that they allowed themselves to truly open up. The beach was nearly deserted, the sand cool under their feet. They found a spot near the water's edge, the gentle ebb and flow of the tide a soothing rhythm in the background. They sat down, their eyes on the horizon where the dark sea met the night sky. Their conversation turned to dreams, to the things they yearned for but had never voiced out loud. Ava spoke of her desire to make a difference, to leave a mark on the world that was uniquely hers. Charles listened, his own dreams surfacing in his mind, dreams he had long since buried. The night deepened, and the stars began to twinkle above them, a tapestry of light against the darkness. They lay back on the sand, the ocean's melody a lullaby, and watched the sky. It was a moment of peace, of stillness in the midst of the chaos of their lives. As they lay there, the barriers between them crumbled. They were no longer just Charles and Ava, the club promoter and the visitor from the Midwest. they were two souls, connected by the shared understanding that they were at a crossroads. Both in their lives and in the life of the nation, the hours passed, and the first hints of dawn began too. Paint the sky with colors of pink and orange. They stood up, brushing the sand from their clothes, and made their way back to the city. The streets were quiet, the earlier revelry a distant memory. They reached Charles's apartment as the sun peeked over the buildings, casting a hopeful glow on the new day. They were tired, but there was a lightness to their steps, a sense of anticipation for what was to come. As they entered the apartment, they knew that something had changed. They were no longer the same people who had met on the lively streets of Los Angeles the night before. They had shared their dreams, their fears, and in doing so, they had found a connection that was rare and precious. The ocean's gentle roar was the only sound as Charles and Ava stood on the cliff, gazing at the stars that sprinkled the night sky. The vastness of the sea mirrored the expanse above, and in that moment, the world seemed infinite, full of possibilities. Ava broke the silence, her voice a soft murmur against the sound of the waves. "So, what's your dream?" Charles turned to look at her, the starlight reflecting in his eyes. "To reclaim mine," he said, his voice tinged with a vulnerability he hadn't shown before. "I wanted to make music, to share it with the world. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that." Ava listened, her heart reaching out to him. "To make a difference," she replied, sharing her own dream. "I want to help people, to make their lives better." They stood there, two souls stripped of pretense, their dreams laid bare under the night sky. The challenge was unspoken, but understood. To dare to dream again, to take the steps toward making those dreams a reality. The tension between them grew, a tangible force that seemed to pull them closer. They were different, yet in that moment, they were the Samituo people yearning for something more, something that had seemed out of reach until now. Charles took a deep breath, the salty air filling his lungs. "Let's do it then. Let's not just dream, but act. Let's make a pact, right here, under the stars." Ava's eyes shone with determination. "A pact to chase our dreams, no matter what." She agreed. They shook hands, the gesture sealing their promise to themselves and to each other. It was a challenge, a commitment to face the obstacles that would come their way. But they were ready as they turned to leave the cliff. The first light of dawn began to creep across the sky, painting it with hues of pink and orange. It was a new day, a symbol of the new path they were embarking on together. They walked back to the city, the election results a distant echo that no longer held the same importance. They had made a choice, and it was one that transcended politics or the expectations of others. The city was waking up, the first signs of life appearing as they reached Charles's apartment. They stepped inside, the warmth enveloping them after the chill of the night. They talked about their plans, about the steps they would take to pursue their dreams. It was a conversation filled with hope, with the excitement of new beginnings. The city of Los Angeles lay spread out below them, a tapestry of lights and shadows, as Charles and Ava stood atop the hill. The distant hum of the city was a stark contrast to the quiet they found themselves in, a bubble of tranquility on the edge of the bustling metropolis. The radio nearby, almost forgotten, murmured the latest election updates. But their focus was elsewhere. "It's like the whole country's on edge," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to break the stillness of the night. Charles nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the city met the sky. "Not just the country, us too," he replied, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. They had come to this place seeking clarity, a moment away from the noise and chaos, to reflect on the paths that had brought them here. It was a night of decisions, not just for the nation, but for two souls who had found each other amidst the uncertainty. Ava turned to Charles, her eyes searching his. "We've talked about dreams and what we want for the future, but what about now? What do we do when the sun comes up?" Charles took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. "We start by making a choice. We decide to take a step forward, to not let fear hold us back." The conversation flowed, a gentle stream of thoughts and confessions. They spoke of the things that scared them, the doubts that crept in during quiet moments, the hope that sparked when they dared to dream. As they talked, the night began to fade, the first hints of dawn painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was a visual promise of a new beginning, a sign that the darkness would always give way to light. The election results continued to come in, a background noise that seemed less important with each passing moment. It was a reminder that the world would keep turning, that life would go on. Regardless of who claimed victory, Charles looked at Ava, a newfound determination in his eyes. "Let's make a pact, right here, right now. We'll chase our dreams, no matter how hard it gets. No matter what anyone else says." Ava's response was a smile, bright and full of promise. "I'm with you, today, tomorrow, and every day after that." They stood together, watching as the city awoke, the first rays of sunlight spilling over the buildings and streets. It was a moment of peace, a shared understanding that they were at a turning point. As they reached the bottom, the sun fully emerged, bathing everything in a warm golden light. It was a new day, a fresh start, and they stepped into it together, their dreams no longer just whispers in the dark. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, Charles's apartment was bathed in a soft golden hue. The night had been long, filled with revelations and the kind of honest conversations that could change the course of a life. Now, as a new day began, Charles and Ava sat side by side, a comfortable silence between them. "You've changed my perspective, you know." Charles broke the silence, his voice low and reflective. Ava turned to him, a gentle smile on her lips. "Guess we've both changed," she replied. The night's events had brought them closer, turning to strangers into confidants. They had shared their dreams and fears, challenged each other, and now, as the world outside awoke, they felt the promise of new beginnings. Charles stood up and walked over to the window, pulling the blinds open fully. The city was waking up, the early morning light casting long shadows on the streets below. He felt a sense of connection to the bustling life outside, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Ava joined him, her gaze following his. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The start of something new." He nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "It's a fresh canvas, a chance to paint our lives with bold, vibrant colors." They talked about what the new day held for them, the steps they would take towards realizing their dreams. For Charles, it meant reigniting his passion for music, something he had set aside in the pursuit of success. For Ava, it was about making a difference, using her voice to inspire change. As they spoke, the apartment filled with the sounds of the city coming to life. The distant honk of cars, the murmur of voices, the rhythmic beat of footsteps. It was a symphony of human existence, and they were part of it. The election results, which had seemed so crucial the night before, faded into the background. What mattered now was the path they had chosen for themselves, the determination to make their dreams a reality. Charles turned to Ava, a newfound energy in his eyes. "Let's make today count. Let's start this journey with a step in the right direction." Ava's response was a nod, her own eyes alight with purpose, one step at a time. But always forward. They prepared breakfast together, a simple meal that felt like a celebration of the bond they had formed. As they ate, they planned, discussing the practical steps they would take, the people they would reach out to, the goals they would set. The morning passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The light in the apartment grew brighter, a visual reminder of the hope that filled their hearts. Eventually, it was time to leave. They stood at the door, reluctant to part ways, but knowing that the journey ahead required it. "This isn't goodbye. It's just see you later," Charles said. His voice steady, but filled with emotion. Ava reached out, her hand resting on his arm. "I'll hold you to that," she promised, and with that, they stepped out into the new day, the warmth of the sun on their faces, their hearts full of hope. The election's outcome was secondary. Now what mattered was the impact they had on each other and the dreams they were determined to chase. As they went their separate ways, the city embraced them, its energy fueling their resolve. They were not just dreamers, they were doers, ready to make a difference in their own lives and the world around them. The club was silent, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the night before. The remnants of the revelry lay scattered, a forgotten scarf, a lone high heel, a champagne glass with a lipstick stain. Charles and Ava stood amidst the echoes of laughter and music, the air heavy with the scent of spilled drinks and memories. Charles swept a hand through his hair, his eyes scanning the empty space. "It's strange," he mused, "how a place so full of life can feel so deserted." Ava nodded, her arms wrapped around herself as if to ward off the chill of the morning. "It's like the end of a dream," she said softly. They moved through the club, their steps slow and deliberate. The election results had been announced, but in this moment, they were inconsequential. What mattered was the connection they had forged, the shared experience that had changed them both. As they reached the entrance, Charles paused, turning to Ava with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I used to think that dreams were just that, dreams, but now I see they can be more. They can be the start of something real." Ava smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the new day. "And sometimes it takes meeting someone to realize that." They stepped outside, the morning sun bathing the streets in a warm glow. The city was awake, alive with the hustle and bustle of people going about their day. Charles and Ava joined the flow, their presence just another part of the tapestry of life. As they walked, they talked about the future, about the steps they would take to pursue their dreams. For Charles, it meant diving back into the world of music, creating the sounds that had once filled his soul with joy. For Ava, it was about activism, about using her voice to affect change. They reached a crossroads, both literal and metaphorical. It was time to part ways, to embark on their individual journeys. Yet, the bond they had formed would not be easily broken. "This isn't goodbye. It's just see you later," Charles said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Ava reached out, her hand resting on his arm. For a moment, "I'll hold you to that," she promised, and with a final smile, they turned and walked away, each step taking them closer to their dreams. The election's outcome was now a distant thought, overshadowed by the personal revelations and the hope that had blossomed within them. As they disappeared into the crowd, the club behind them remained silent, a testament to the night that had passed. But for Charles and Ava, the silence was not an end, but a beginning dawn of a new day, filled with endless possibilities.